Welcome back to Project 613. Today we will learn about something called demai. What is demai? Well, in fact, the word demai means what is, or what is this? And we will learn what this has to do with today's mitzvah, which is the mitzvah of separating the 10%, the first tithe that's given to the Levim, to the Levites, which is the mitzvah we've been learning over the past few days. But first, let's talk about a time in our history when there was a certain laxity in this mitzvah, which will then lead us on to the discussion of demai. And in fact, there was twice in our history where this mitzvah suffered from a certain lack of care and wasn't practiced in the way it should have been. The first time that this happened was during the time of Ezra. Ezra led the Jews who returned from Babylonia and Persia after the Babylonian exile, after the destruction of the first temple. And Ezra led them to rebuild the second temple 70 years later. Now, something very unfortunate happened then, and that was that many Jews chose to remain in Babylonia and Persia and not to come back to rebuild the temple. Whereas the Kohanim, the priests, did return, and many of the Israelites did return, but most of the Levites, most of the Levim, chose to remain in Persia or Babylonia and not to come back. And it was at that time that Ezra and his Bet Din penalized the Levim, and he punished them, and it was decided that the Ma'aser Rishon, the first tithe, the 10% of the produce, which should be given to the Levim, will be diverted, and instead of being given to the Levites, would be from now on given to the Kohanim as well. It would be given to the priests, and this would be as a punishment for them not returning to build the second temple. There is a debate about until when this edict of Ezra lasted. Was it only during his lifetime or during the entire second temple era? But this is the first time that we see this laxity when it comes to this mitzvah. But this was on the part of the Levim, on the part of the recipients of these gifts. But then, about 200 years later, it was during the era of Yochanan Kohen Gadol, Yochanan the high priest, and it was at the time during the middle of the Second Temple era when there was already strong Hellenistic influence on the Jewish people. And the Bet Din of the time sent out a survey to the entire Jewish community. And the results came back and showed that whereas the people were being very careful when it came to separating Terumah, which is the 2% that's given to the Kohanim, they were not being careful at all when it came to separating the 10% that has to go to the Levites. Why? It could be a number of reasons. Number one, because the mitzvah of Terumah is a stricter mitzvah. It's a stricter violation. But most likely, it has to do with the fact that Terumah only requires a person to give 2%. Not only that, biblically, even one stalk is enough to give for Terumah. It doesn't even have to be 2%, whereas to give Ma'aser, which is 10%, people were not so willing to do that. So it was at that time that the Bet Din saw there is a problem, because as we've already learned, produce, which the correct tithes have not been given, is forbidden for us to eat. And this is where demai comes in. Demai comes from the words da-mai, what is this? It was at that time that the Bet Din said, anytime we see produce that is not verified, if the tithes have been given, it enters the status of demai. It has the status of demai. What is this produce? Is it fit for consumption or not? Was the Terumat and Masrat taken or were they not? And therefore, they decreed that any demai produce, which is any produce that has not been verified, that the correct tithes have been given, a person would have to give the tithes again, just in case. This is what demai means. According to Maimonides, the word demai comes from the root of these two words, da-mai, what is it? According to others, it comes from the root word of the Hebrew of shema, which means perhaps the tithes have been taken, perhaps they have not been taken. It was at that time also that in Jewish terminology, the concept of a chaver was introduced. A chaver means someone who is reliable, someone who is considered stringent on mitzvah observance. And the Bet Din at the time issued a verdict where only produce that is purchased or received from a chaver, that could be relied on, and one would not have to separate Trumat and Masrat again. But any other produce has the status of demai, and the Trumat and the Masrat, the tithes, would have to be separated once again, just in doubt. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.